I'm Alex Meyer. I'm the head brewer at Upslope Brewing Company. I've worked at Upslope for almost 10 years now. In its simplest form, the Space Terroir Project is a wild, inoculated beer that just reflects the surroundings in which it was made, the open space around Boulder, Colorado. It's the culmination of 4 years of brewing and patience. This all started back in 2019 as sort of an experiment. I think one thing that made this interesting is that most people didn't realize that I was even making it for a while, so it was sort of a behind the scenes, sort of low-key project. It's really cool to see it all come together. The genesis of the Space Terroir Project started back in 2019. It was inspired by lambic style beers from the Seine River Valley in Belgium. Those are produced using a cool ship to spur spontaneous inoculation of the beer. So that means that the beer is fermented solely with microbes that are in the air and in the surroundings of the brewery. We do not have a cool ship, so I wanted to make a beer that was inspired by that in our own way. There's a ton of these microbes that are all over the place on plants and different, pine needles, flowers, what have you. So in 2019, I went around the property of Upslope and foraged my own plants in the spring, trying to see if I could get a diverse group of them, including flowers and Douglas fir needles and different grasses, and decided to brew a beer to see if it would work. So the beer is made with 60% malted barley and 40% unmalted wheat. That's pretty traditional lambic grist. And we mashed it using a method to produce a dextrinous wort. So the idea behind that is that you're producing a really complex sugar profile in the wort that allows a bunch of different microorganisms to flourish at different times in fermentation. After we produce the wort, you need to boil it just like any traditional brewing process, and we used aged hops, which is also a similarity with lambic production. That definitely lends a very unique flavor and some subtle bitterness that's different than your typical IPA, but it definitely adds to the character of the beer. After we brewed the wort, it was racked into neutral oak barrels that had been steamed to render them as sterile as possible, so we didn't have any other influence of microbes that may have been harbored in the wood. And then we pitched our starter that captured that yeast and bacteria from the plants that I had gathered into those barrels. And within a week, we started to see signs of fermentation. It was kind of interesting because you never knew if it was going to work at the time. I'm pretty confident that it would, but it's reassuring when you see that blow off coming out of the barrels. So that was definitely like a wild yeast taking hold, starting to ferment the beer. After that, you kind of let it do its thing and age in the barrels for about a year. And I figured, well, with this first one, why don't we make another vintage the following spring? So in 2020, did that again, and in 2021, repeated the process. So picked the favorite barrels of the bunch. After choosing the 3, we blended those together and bottled it. And the beer has been conditioning in a bottle for about a year. That allows it to gain carbonation and develop some additional flavors. And now it's ready in 2023, nearly 4 years after we started making it. After a year of bottle conditioning, we have some lively carbonation coming out. A great, beautifully hued beer, very aromatic. You get sort of that funk that I was talking about earlier. A little of the aged hop presence is there as sort of a subtle bitterness. And then it has a nice tartness to it, blended by that lactic acid bacteria, sort of a lemon tartness. You get a little bit of a minerality, sort of an herbaceous character. The Terroir Project was really inspired by walking around in the open space in Boulder, Colorado. Just all the natural surroundings in there, the sensory that you get when you're walking along the trail, and wanting to make a beer that tried to capture some of that. We wanted this beer to support that cause, and that's where Boulder Open Space Conservancy, also known as BOSC, comes in. In addition to just being a source of inspiration, BOSC really aligned with our values at Upslope as a B Corp. We really like to preserve these natural spaces, and we wanted to do what we could to support the inspiration for the beer. And it's really cool to see it all come together and just become a cohesive beer that I'm pretty proud of, and it's really unique, and I think that was what I was going for. Yeah, I think if anything, it's just been a lesson in patience and just trying something out even if you don't know if it's going to work, and trying to keep pushing boundaries and doing something that's really fun and interesting.